Hey guys, just wanted to jump on here really quick. I've had a lot of people reach out to me in terms of how they can support what I'm doing. I am doing this full time now, and if you'd like to contribute, if you like and value the work that I'm doing and like to contribute, on every single episode I have a title "Support My Work." Underneath it, there's a Venmo, Locals, Cash App, or if you prefer not to use one of those methods, you can mail a check or money order to PO Box 25383, Scottsdale, Arizona 85255 9998. So, again, thank you for all the support. Appreciate it and look forward to more conversations ahead. Larry, good to see you. And yeah, I don't even know where we should start today. I mean, I guess the helicopter plane crash last night.
Yeah, that was, I've flown in and out of that airport, good Lord, hundreds of times. And, uh, I think the first likely suspect in this screw up will be the air traffic controller because, um, they're looking at a screen where they can tell both where the aircraft is physically located as well as the altitude. And look, these are tough jobs. They do require a special level of intelligence dealing with uh, spatial concepts. If you ever took the SAT test and remember some of the geometric figures that were arranged, and you had to figure out which was the next logical one, people that are really good air traffic controllers just ace those kinds of tests. So first and foremost, instead of it's reported out that the air traffic controller said, uh, "Oh, do you see the other plane? Hey, you've got a screen in front of you which tells you that both aircraft are at the same altitude. You give orders immediately: helicopter descend to 200 feet or ascend to 500. Get out of the damn way." Didn't do that. Um, but then it introduces what was the helicopter pilot doing, and they indicated that so this was nighttime training, and they were training for a simulated evacuation of key government officials from Washington D.C. to take them out to the mountain out west. They were exercising a nuclear attack scenario, and was the pilot operating with night vision goggles? Because that could have also been a factor. But they're dead. All these people dead, and Trump. I think Trump. He was very strong about, hey, uh, intimating that this may have a DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion dimension. That maybe the person who was sitting in that chair running doing the air traffic control was really not competent to do it. Uh, and if it turns out that they were a DEI hire, there's a lot of blood on the hands of the people that made that decision.
But doing those types of training exercises is not uncommon, though, right? With a
Well, it's not uncommon, but again, it's hey, when they go before they take off, they do a brief, and in part of that brief, there's got to be coordination and communication with the air traffic controllers in the area because that's a heavily traveled area on that part of the Potomac. So you've got on the west bank of the Potomac is Washington Reagan National Airport. On the east bank, a little more downriver, about a half mile or so, is Fort Belvoir. And Fort Belvoir is where the Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters is. Uh, so, um, it is, it's just, it's one of those areas that because of the traffic, you got to have extra precautions. And apparently those precautions weren't followed.
Yeah, I saw. Was it 16 figure skaters were on that commercial flight?
Yeah, 14 figure skaters and their parents and coaches.
And nobody survived,
Yeah, apparently, yeah, nobody survived at all.
including the military people flying
Yeah,
the
yeah,
helicopter.
and I misspoke. It wasn't Belvoir is farther south. This is actually Bowling Air Force Base, Joint Base. They call it Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, but it's Bowling is across the street, across the river from there. But yeah, you've got, they were apparently a significant number out of the Boston Figure Skating Club, and I just saw it. They had a news conference with Nancy Kerrigan, the Olympic champion who was taken out by Tanya Harding. Uh, Nancy was a member of that club up there, and they're very, very upset because they've lost friends. They knew these kids and the coaches and their parents.
You know, it's amazing, with the news cycle coming at us so fast. I mean, people last night I was getting messages of like, what's going on here? What was the plan? What was the it's you always assume, was there some type of withdrawal occurring, or was this an assassination attempt? Some, just all kinds of theories that are out there with with just the world we live in today. It's crazy.
Well, if again, the people are looking at a video, and from the video, it looks like the helicopter flies directly into the plane, um, which it did, but that is as if it was a deliberate targeting. But if in fact the helicopter was coming in at an angle from behind the aircraft, and the descending aircraft, and so it's coming in at an angle, and it doesn't see the plane. It's like a blind spot off of your left side. You don't see that plane coming in at that level, and you're flying. You think you're going to make it, and boom. Um, Awful. But it shouldn't have happened. There should have been communication, and there should, clearly. Look, that's why they have an air traffic controller. They hear that word, controller. You control what the air traffic is doing. You don't leave it up to each of them to figure it out. You tell them heading and altitude. You tell the, and let them know if there's any threats in the area. And we've got, at least on audio, the air traffic controller saying, "Hey, you got visual on that aircraft?" Oh, dude. Before you're asking about do you have visual, ask, hey, descend to X amount, X altitude, or ascend or descend, one or the other. But don't stay on that altitude because there's going to be a collision.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the audios will come out right at some point.
Yeah.
What the conversations were.
Yeah.
It's the world just feels very. Does the world feel very unstable to you right now, Larry? Like worse
Well,
than.
actually, I think, since Trump came in, it actually feels a little more stable. So, I think uh, we've caught a respite for now. Now, whether Donald Trump takes advantage of this opportunity, because he's facing a historic moment in much the same ways that George W. Bush did in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, George W. Bush could have really used that event to build a world order that was peaceful, that was encompassing, would have achieved levels of cooperation with Iran and with China and Russia. But no, he didn't. He blew it all away, screwed it into the dirt, went to war, didn't pursue Al Qaeda, and then went to war in Iraq just to get oil to Israel, basically. So here's Trump. Trump has the potential to either conclude a peace agreement with Russia and restart nuclear arms control agreements, to secure a peace in the Middle East that will provide the Palestinians a state while preserving Israel's right to exist, and settle with China. those would be three big projects. But if he achieved those three, good Lord, we wouldn't have there's not a president living or dead that could match those accomplishments. I mean, Trump would probably deserve to have his face etched, engraved on Mount Rushmore. But, and here's the big but, if he pisses away this opportunity, he'll be a historic president, but for the wrong reasons, having brought more chaos and death to the world. So we'll see. Listen, it's in his hands right now.
What would be the first, what would be the order then to tackle this for him?
Well, order number one is to end this war in Ukraine right away. And that would entail one, cutting off all aid to Ukraine, pulling out U.S. troops and the CIA out of Ukraine, and agreeing to shut down the NATO bases in Poland and Romania, as well as lifting sanctions on Russia. Do all that, defuse it, and then say, okay, we'll get we'll get down now to discussions about how to start eliminating nuclear weapons. I'm not sure that that's achievable anymore because Russia is so, I guess, jaded about the reliability of dealing with Washington, regardless of who's in the chair. But Trump could rapidly defuse the war in Ukraine, and ratchet down the tensions with the Russians. You ought to do that as priority number one. Second priority is he's under pressure to attack Iran, but it looks like, and I hope the reports are true, that he sent his golfing buddy, Steve Witkoff, to Iran to talk to the Iranians about a peace deal. And the Iranians are certainly open to it. So, that'll be priority number two. And then three, you've got these crazies in the U.S. military that want to go to war with China. And, the Chinese are preparing accordingly. They've listened to what we said, and they're taking us at our word. So they're preparing to go to war with us. He needs to, pour some oil on those troubled waters.
So, okay, so going through, each one, Putin now, because, and correct me here, but it's not as if Trump can just come in and negotiate like a car.
Oh yeah, well he's not negotiating a property deal. It's like
You froze for you froze for a sec, Larry. Go ahead. Sorry, you froze for a second. Property deal.
A property deal is if Vladimir Putin owns a bankrupt casino, and that is upside down and can't make the payments. So and in that situation, man, if you're Trump, you can negotiate hard because the guy's got to make a deal or he's going under. That's not this at all. Think of Vladimir Putin as an ugly version of Melania Trump. That Trump wants to marry her. Trump's looking for a relationship, not a deal. And he's got to approach it as such. So right now he's approaching it like he's dealing with a bankrupt casino owner, and that works as long as your assumptions about the bankrupt casino owner are correct. And he's assuming that, oh my God, the Russians are suffering, he said 1 million casualties and their economy's teetering on the brink, that they can't survive. Well, none of that's true. And so all of a sudden he goes in with those assumptions, and Putin is just going to look at him and say, what, are you crazy? You're not even in the ballpark. We're going to press forward and defeat Ukraine. Well, in fact, why should we stop now? We're going to achieve our goals militarily, with you or without you. And then at that point, Trump's going to have to step back and reevaluate his negotiating posture.
What does Putin want at this point?
Uh, to demilitarize Ukraine, that eliminate Ukraine's military so it's no longer capable of attacking Russia. Ensure that Ukraine will never become a member of NATO, and to get assurances from NATO that it will start removing missiles uh, from bases in Romania and Poland that can be used to attack Russia. Those three things right off the bat.
So these conversations, when they occur, Zelensky's going to have something to say, and so will the rest of Europe.
Zelensky's got nothing to say. He doesn't, what has he got to say? He's entirely dependent upon the United States. He doesn't control any territory. So, he's in the process of getting wiped out. It's just death by attrition. That's what's taking place. And the Europeans also, they're irrelevant. They don't have all of them combined couldn't put an army in the field that would match what Russia has. So it's just, they're like a loudmouth little dog, an annoying little dog, Mexican Chihuahuas. They can be particularly nasty little beasts.
Well, what happens to Zelensky after all this?
He will either be killed in office or will find a cushy exile somewhere, escape like the last president of Afghanistan escaped when the U.S. military started pulling out. Supposedly he's got property here in Florida, over on the East Coast. So we'll see if he's able to find a peaceful exit. But I don't think so. I think he's likely to wind up dead in office or imprisoned. But I don't think it's going to end well for him.
By his own people?
Yeah.
With that, then let's say the aftermath. So what is your what do you think in terms of how this will get worked out? I mean, will this continue? This going back and forth with Russia, or
no. In fact, I just saw numbers about 3 hours ago. Ukraine's suffering minimum 50,000 casualties a month now. So just in the last 3 months, November, December, January, they've suffered over 150,000 killed and wounded soldiers. They're barely able to bring in 20,000 new soldiers a month, so they're not even able to replace what they're losing. They are in truly a downward spiral. So they will be militarily defeated. Russia will oversee the installation of a new government, new elections. They'll probably initially set up a ruling committee, a military governor, just sort of like the United States did in Japan at the end of World War II. And then work with developing a new government that's going to be free of the Nazis. I mean, that's what's so crazy about all of this. You have all these Jews who weep the crocodile tears, justifiably so, about the Holocaust. Oh, the Nazis tried to exterminate us. Yes, they did. And what do? You turn around and embrace Nazis and celebrate Nazis and protect Nazis in Ukraine. So how can they take you seriously? I mean, if you're a, quote, Holocaust believer and then an embracer of Ukraine, then your beliefs about the Holocaust are ridiculous. They mean nothing. They're not genuine. Either you genuinely believe that the Nazis tried to exterminate the Jews and want to exterminate Jews, or you don't. But you can't step back and say, yeah, Hitler tried to do it, but these guys that are celebrating Stepan Bandera, who led to the murders of over 150,000 Poles between 1943 and 44, and who was the head of an SS division, they embrace him. It's just, there's no moral consistency there. That's for sure.
Yeah, how does that country rebuild at this when it ends? So you anticipate this to be ending some type of conclusion here, short order.
I don't see, maybe there'll be some way to string it on past the summer, but I don't see how it goes on past the summer. Simply because, if Trump reverses himself and starts pumping more weapons in, that's fine. But the weapons don't solve the problem that the Ukrainians have, which is manpower. Where do they get new manpower? They just, and any manpower solution you got to recognize means, for them to be anywhere near competent on the battlefront, they need 12 months of training minimum, preferably more, but at least 12 months of training. Well, they don't have 12 months. It's not like Ukraine's got time. I've used the football analogy. Well, in the case of Ukraine, they're in the fourth quarter. The score is 70-0 favor of Russia, and they got 2 minutes left to play. They're not going to score enough touchdowns to win the game, ever. Yeah, that they need to come to grips with that.
Yeah, I've only seen so far Trump saying to Putin, make a deal.
And Putin's saying, why do I need to make a deal? Again, Trump's assumption, and it's a wrong assumption, is that Putin's under pressure and that Putin's desperate to make a deal. Well, step back and say, wonder if that assumption's wrong. Wonder if Putin's not under pressure. And Putin certainly doesn't want to make a deal. Then what?
So that's one thing that Trump has to deal with right now. You wonder how would it ever get to a point where they would meet each other face to face to work?
Oh, sure. I know that the Russian Foreign Ministry is reaching out, taking a variety of initiatives to try to see if they can reopen dialogue. In fact, one of the blessings, if you will, and one of the silver linings out of the dark cloud of the plane crash, the two of the coaches on board that plane are former world champions from 1994, both Russian. And their bodies will be returned to Russia. So this right away has opened up a dialogue that we've not really seen between State Department and the Foreign Ministry in Moscow. So, maybe that's going to be the death of those two will be a way to start opening the door for some more reasonable conversations between Washington and Moscow.
Why is there people in Washington that are so insistent on going to war with China? I mean, you're seeing it appears to be an AI war that's taken place. Isn't it amazing, yeah, Larry, that Trump has only been in for, what are we on, 10 days, 9 days?
Yeah, 9 days.
And I was actually talking to a J6er earlier today about his experience. Boy, that's unbelievable. But I said, I go, man, the inauguration, it feels like it was 6 months ago already. And it was just last week.
Yeah. No, he's, Trump's moving fast on this, and this, they can't figure out what they're trying to do with China, whether we want to go to war with China or be friends with China. So, I step back and say, okay, let's deal with reality. Reality number one. The United States is more dependent on China for import. We need to import rare earth minerals. We need to import critical pharmaceutical products, including insulin. So to get into a trade war or impose tariffs on any of those would end up hurting the Americans, not Chinese. Uh, the Chinese have responded to our tariffs or sanctions by imposing sanctions on Western businessmen that used to be able to go into China freely. The Chinese economy is consistently touted as being very bad and doing poorly. Yet the Chinese automobile industry over the last 4 years has taken off in a way that it's going to steamroll the U.S. auto industry and frankly the German auto industry. The they'll become like Studebakers, rare. A rare automobile that doesn't really exist and nobody makes anymore. So that, and then Trump's decision to make an issue about the Chinese and the Panama Canal is just ridiculous. The Chinese have been, they've been managing the container ports in that canal. Good Lord, I think for 24 years at least, 24, 25 years. We're talking a quarter of a century. This is nothing that just started under Biden. It was underway under Trump in his first term, and during Obama and during George W. Bush. So I don't understand quite the urgency that's suddenly arisen that, we got to stop China from controlling the Panama Canal. The fact of the matter was U.S. firms didn't bid on the contracts to run those ports. Chinese did.
And how many American freight ships do we have coming through there anyway now?
I ran the figures. 99.5% of all ships, commercial ships carrying cargo, are not carrying a U.S. flag. In other words, 0.5%.
So what's the significance of him talking about the Panama Canal? Why now?
I think he's using it as a bargaining ploy with China, because maybe he thinks he can disrupt the Chinese. The problem we have is that we see the Panama Canal as important for the movement of our Navy from the Pacific to the Atlantic or vice versa. But that's sort of what I call 19th and 20th century thinking. Because in the 20th century, your aircraft carriers, boy, who could stop them? But now we're in the 21st century, the era of hypersonic missiles and drones. And the Houthis have shown exactly how limited the capability of these aircraft carriers are. I'm not even sure an aircraft carrier can transit the Panama Canal. I know that battleships and destroyers could, and have been, I've heard Doug McGregor said that was why the ship design for U.S. vessels was specific to allow them to pass through the Panama Canal. I don't know if the same applied to the aircraft carrier. I don't think so.
Is that the art of the deal what Trump's doing right now with that in Greenland?
It may be. Again, I go back to the analogy you used earlier. Who are you negotiating with? If you're negotiating with somebody who's in financial distress, and even there, this is what Trump learned early on. If I owe you, $20,000, and you can take me to court, you can really create a lot of problems if I don't pay you back. If I owe you $200 million and I'm threatening to default, and your net worth is $200 million, you don't have a lot of leverage. You're going to do everything you can to keep me afloat. That's sort of how Donald Trump survived. Once he realized he was too big to fail, he had leverage over the banks. But so it's all, what we're talking here is all a matter of leverage. Who has the leverage? And there are, some, if you're holding the dominant hand with the Trump cards, yeah, you can bully people. But if you're at a disadvantage, if the other person holds the Trump cards, you got to have an entirely different approach. Uh, and remains to be seen. I think Trump understands that. We'll see if that understanding is translated into action.
What do you think he wants out of China? Because, and before you answer that, I mean, you see the tariff. I mean, that's like that's the go to. That's been the go to card since since last
Yeah,
week. Where
yeah,
Colombia, you saw that,
right.
and it worked. He's talked about February 1st. Implementing tariffs. So, in regards to China or Russia, you're dealing with a different kind of animal here.
Yeah, well, the economy. Hey, the economies are bigger. With Russia, for example, what is he going to put tariffs on uranium? We need uranium. That's why we're still buying from the Russians because we don't have another source for it. So we need their processed uranium to put into our nuclear power plants. So this would be like, like you're a diabetic, you need insulin, and all of a sudden you're going to start taxing your insulin provider, making them pay 50% more. They're just going to charge you 50% more. So, that's a stupid, it's one of those things that makes you feel good, but it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I showed them I was the tough guy. Well, this is not time or place to play the tough guy. You know, Trump can get away with it with Colombia, that's fine. But doing it with Russia and China, it's not going to work. And China's already cut off some critical minerals essential for the production of U.S. weapons. Antimony is one of those. Palladium, I think, is another. Uh, so, the United States has been shooting itself in the foot.
What are your thoughts then on does Trump want to work a deal with China and then they coexist together?
Yeah, I mean, look, there are there are ample reasons to be concerned about China. But I was part of a conversation on Tuesday with a group of, they're very, some of them are pretty well known in public as far as for in the investment community anyway.
Is it a public conversation, Larry, or private?
Private,
Mm.
private, Chatham House rules. But what the majority of them were saying was they assume, those Chinese are not doing any good. They're liars. The Chinese are nothing but, it was all this anti-China rhetoric. Now, I harbor no illusions about uh, the Chinese are, they've been great at counterfeiting goods, great at stealing, uh, plagiarizing U.S. technology or other technology. But we've now gotten to this place where the United States is so dismissive of the Chinese, it's really racist. We really look at it, that's a, dumb yellow bastards, that kind of thing. And yet China right now is graduating far more science, technology, STEM graduates, math graduates than the United States. And a significant number of those that graduate in the United States are Chinese. So China is taking the lead technologically, and these new AI platforms, artificial intelligence platforms, are coming out with are examples of that. Um, so, you know, I've seen China involved with, or Chinese individuals tied into organized crime involved with the straw purchase of automobiles in the United States. That's where they'll basically pay someone to go in and buy a BMW or a Mercedes Benz and then give it to the Chinese broker and they get paid $1,000 on top of having what they paid for the car. And then the Chinese would ship it to Beijing and sell it. And they would undercut the price of the regular Mercedes Benz dealer or the BMW dealer. So they were doing that. They've circumvented trade sanctions. There was one guy that was prohibited. He was dumping aluminum in the United States. He got sanctioned. So he went and he cut a deal with a Mexican drug cartel, the Knights Templar, and was shipping the Chinese aluminum to Mexico. The Mexicans were restamping it as made in Mexico, hecho en Mexico, and then ship it into the United States under uh, the treaty, the North American NAFTA, North American Free Trade Association. And then see what else. Oh, the Chinese are actively involved, some elements in the government, coordinating with the Mexican and Colombian drug cartels in the production of narcotics. Plus, they're producing. They come up with their own line of synthetic narcotics, so they no longer need the Colombians or Mexicans. So yeah, the Chinese on those fronts, the Chinese are doing some bad things, and we need to, you deal with that. But we're not in a position to threaten them. We're going to have to find a way to get them to see that it's in their interest as well to work with us.
Going to you talking about the drug trades in Mexico, and we'll work our way back to the Middle East. But what are your thoughts then? I'm confused if Trump declared an executive order labeling the cartels as a terrorist organization. Did that
Yeah,
happen? It did happen. Okay.
yeah, I did.
Where,
I didn't see that if he gave a complete list of the names. Did he call out the Sinaloa cartel, the Valle del Norte? Uh, you know, I don't know if he called them out by name or just it was a lump term, Mexican drug traffickers. But hey, there's already been a movie made about this, Sicario.
it's a good movie.
Yeah, you've seen it.
Yeah, the second one's good too.
Yeah, Sicario too. So where you have CIA cross-border operations killing people involved with the drug cartels. Uh, I'm not sure that's a wise policy because I always believe that if you really want to uh, harm these cartels, take their money. Go get the money. Now, here's the problem. And we're seeing like a different manifestation of this here in Florida. The conflicts of interest. So let me first highlight what's happened here in Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis, called a special session of the legislature to enact legislation to support Donald Trump's get rid of the illegal migrant communities. And it's Republican controlled House and Senate. And what they came in was try to push through a piece of crap legislation that strips DeSantis of his authority to do any enforcement and places it all with the Department of Agriculture. Now, why do you think that is, Michael? Because the Department of Agriculture oversees all these big corporate farmers that are employing all these illegal aliens and paying them shit wages, and so that they can be profitable. They don't get paid a real wage. They don't get insurance. They don't get any benefits whatsoever. It's a form of slavery. It's exploitation. And the Republicans are all in favor, a significant number are going along with it because it's about the money. Okay. So yeah, we can arm Delta Force to the teeth to go in and try to kill these people. Well, we already tried that. One of my former business partners, former only because he retired, Roberto Nieves, Bobby. Bobby was the sort of the brains behind the Kingpin program that started in the 1980s. And the Kingpin program said, let's go take out the top leaders of the cartels. Take out Pablo Escobar. Take out the brothers running the Cali cartel. And we did that. And what happened? It was like hitting a ball of mercury with a hammer. Fragments, stays intact, but in smaller fragments, less able to control. Get the money. Because there are U.S. corporations, U.S. businesses, U.S. banks, that are profiting off of the drug trade. And hell, members of Congress. There's one, I won't mention his name, but there's one member of Congress in the Texas delegation that was directly taking money from one of the Mexican drug cartels. We know this because he was getting support through one of these duty-free stores on the border. And this particular member of Congress has a brother who's a sheriff and a sister who's a federal judge. So the corruption runs deep. So yeah, we can thump our chest. We're going to go kill some cartel guys. Let's take care of the money here on our side of the border. Let's make it no longer profitable to do business with the cartel. You do that, you know what? Then you make a significant impact. But the problem with it is you got people on both sides, Republican and Democrat, who are making money off of this. So that's why they don't want to give it up.
That's why they never, the fact that people weren't interested, in my opinion, of closing the border over the last 4 years. I think what you just said is an example of it. And here's the other thing. UPS, FedEx, I never saw any of those CEOs brought to the Hill to testify how all these drugs are getting in right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Any of these carriers being questioned of what are you doing to mitigate some of this? I never saw anything.
Yeah. No. Again, you just follow the money. And I think I've talked about it on your show before. We did a thing with John Deere. I'll mention the company that we identified, at least on one transaction, they were accepting money that was coming out of Colombia that was linked to the drug trade as payment for a tractor. They should have turned that and said, no, we're not gonna take dirty money. They took dirty money. So, but John Deere's not the only one. Good Lord, all the tobacco companies, the liquor companies, even companies that make sports. You want to talk Nike, Under Armour, Samsung. Any commercial product that's bought and sold, and this is where Panama Canal comes in, because at the north end of the Panama Canal sits the Cologne Free Trade Zone. And the volumes of money, black market, gray market money that flow through there, frankly, the average American has no idea. It's gargantuan, the amount, staggering sums.
So is that why the United States wants to take control of it back?
I don't know if they thought that one through. I think they're using it, again, to go after the Chinese. Because the money, the money filters, most of the transactions are done in dollars anyway, so the United States is already profiting off of it.
Do you see it escalating then between United States, relations deteriorating with Mexico, and do you see escalation from the standpoint of cartel within the United States?
Yeah, there is always that potential if Trump follows through on this without reverting to his "let's make a deal" attitude. Mexico is a narco state. There's no doubt about it. But you know what? In some aspects, the United States is too.
I can tell you,
United States,
Arizona. Not to interrupt you, Larry, but Arizona, where I live, this has got to be a narco state, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's here we legitimize some of our narcotics, where the pharmaceutical companies pay off members of Congress to look the other way and not enforce the law against them or pass laws that would be limit their ability to exploit Americans. We saw that with the testimony yesterday of RFK Jr. How the members of Congress who've received the most political contributions from the pharmaceutical industry were leading the attack on RFK Jr. Just out of curiosity, have you looked? Go to the CDC website and look at the number of recommended vaccinations for kids 1 year and younger. It's astonishing. It's like 20. Now, I grew up born in the 50s, grew up in the 60s. Back then you got mumps. Well, actually, I had the mumps, I had the measles, so didn't even need the vaccines. I had chicken pox, but we took the polio vaccine, took the smallpox vaccine. Uh, that was about it. Now they've got the number of vaccines because what's this all about? It's all about creating a demand. So the government said, "Oh, you got to take these vaccines." You've now created a demand, and these pharmaceutical companies profit off of it, and they end up sharing the profits with members of Congress. They buy members of Congress through political contributions.
Well, and that's where, the whole big pharma, and I've used it, comparing it to the cartel because we'll see if he gets confirmed in, but big pharma's not going to let them just come in and tear down their empire. Same with the cartel, right?
Yeah.
The cartel's not going to go away quietly, but I
Well,
don't see them blowing up buildings in Phoenix because that would draw a lot of attention.
no, no, never underestimate their ability to make irrational decisions because, you say here, Trump's making a bit of an irrational decision. Could I come back? What's the goal? Is the goal to stop the flow of fentanyl and cocaine into the United States so that not many Americans die? That's our goal. Great. Let's first focus upon, let's go after the money. Let's make it so prohibitively expensive, costly, that anybody who facilitates drug trafficking at all will suffer financially, first and foremost. My other business partner is a genius with this stuff. He ran undercover money laundering operations in New York City for 4 years and learned very quickly. They had one case where he had scammed one of the Colombian drug cartels into believing that they had bought a full ship, these large containers that are on ships, the 40-foot containers, that they had bought a bunch of containers of brand new automobiles that were being smuggled out of the United States. Now, but what they did, they waited until there was a hurricane predicted, and then they staged the sinking of the ship during a hurricane. So all the vehicles were lost. So the cartel had paid the money, and my partner had gotten the money from the drug cartel, and they put it into an asset forfeiture fund. But then they'd actually bought the cars. But what they did with those cars, they gave them to cops throughout Florida, to police departments through Florida. However, when that alleged ship went down, the cartel hired a search and salvage team to go out and try to find it and bring the cars out. So that's an illustration that they're more interested in the money, the product, what they buy with their illegally obtained riches.
So now shifting then, okay, so to summarize that, do you see it escalating and do you see more Central South America countries banding together with Mexico or?
Um, no, I said, well, what I see is the United States is now going to try to reassert its dominance over both Central and South America. The number one target is Brazil because of its membership in BRICS. Um, Argentina has decidedly aligned itself with Trump, and Malay at least has got the balance sheet of Argentina looking good for the first time in years. Now, uh, critics will say, "Hey, he's doing that at the cost of impoverishing people." Maybe that may be the case as well. I haven't been there for quite a while. It's been, I guess, 24 years since I was last in Argentina. But United States and Argentina have an alliance. Venezuela will be targeted. Cuba will be targeted. So yeah, I explained to a friend of mine the other day that the targeting of countries like Cuba and Venezuela plays great with the red meat crowd here in the United States. Yeah, by God, we're standing up to those communist socialists, whatever. Put in your epithet. But what that kind of external attack does within those countries is creates support for the government, doesn't diminish support. Um, and so you end up prolonging governments. We want to change the government in Cuba. I said, if that's our goal, open it up. Open it up to complete free movement of trade, eliminate all sanctions, open it up. Because at that point, then, the Cuban leaders will no longer have the excuse to blame, now the reason your life sucks is because of the United States sanctions. Once those sanctions go away, it says, hey, your life sucks because I'm a terrible leader. A big difference. So, but we so far haven't been smart enough to try that as an approach.
Well, and would we have the manpower? I mean, if things were to escalate, I mean, would you travel to Mexico or Central South America right now as a leisurely vacation?
Not for vacation. I mean, I'd go for work, but I wouldn't take my wife on a escapade down there now. Particular the Mexico, it's too dangerous. It is. Um, I would like to go back with some control into a place like Honduras to see how it's changed. Because I lived there first. Oh my God, 40, uh, 47 years ago, almost 50 years ago, and then went back in '81, so 44 years ago. But and I've lived in Guatemala, so I have pretty good knowledge about Guatemala, Honduras. Lived in Argentina, um, but I can see that this is, there's going to be a split. There are some states in central, the Salvadoran government's going to align itself closely with Trump. Panamanian government, though, isn't. Now, it depends on how far the U.S. wants to press that confrontation. And candidly, it's sort of foolish because uh, I wouldn't be surprised that would create some folks who will try to sabotage the canal, sink a couple of ships in the canal, shut it down.
What about Brazil?
Brazil, the Lula um, is the Brazil's in charge of BRICS. There's a sitting the head of BRICS for a year. I see the United States. I wouldn't be surprised to see CIA running some destabilization operations against Lula and to try to force Lula to separate himself from the Chinese and the Russians, which might happen. We'll see. But there is definitely uh, efforts underway to make life uncomfortable for the Brazilians if they don't play ball with the United States.
So now we come to the homeland, and then combine that with the Middle East. I mean, I was watching a little bit of the Tulsi hearings today. Pete Hegseth gets confirmed. Um, what are your thoughts on both of them? And then, this anti-Semitism bill that's Trump did an executive order on.
Yeah.
People are I don't know if people are cheering it, but they better.
No, they shouldn't. I mean, look, um, be in favor of the First Amendment or not. You can't pretend that you just want it to work for issues that you like. Um, the notion that criticism of Israel translates into anti-Semitism is just garbage. Uh, Israel, in my view, is a genocidal state. And we have a lot of what I call Christian Zionists who are facilitating their murder of Palestinian Christians. Let's understand what we're talking about here. Israel's not just attacking Muslims. Israel's attacking Palestinian Christians, picking them up, putting them in jail for not having committed a crime and never facing charges. So um, to impose those kinds of restrictions on free speech, shameful. Absolutely, absolutely shameful. Um, the you know Getting Hegseth through as Secretary of Defense, I don't think Hegseth is qualified for the job. I think it's too big a job for him. Um, I don't think he's had enough experience to be able to anticipate the issues that will come forward. I mean, it's good that Trump wanted to get somebody who's not compromised by the whole military industrial complex and defense industry. But, the part of Hegseth's problem is he's not, I don't think he's up to speed on the kind of bureaucratic warfare that's going to be waged here and what will be done to undermine him or the landmines that'll be put out there to ambush him. Uh, Watching, I hope Tulsi Gabbard gets through. I watched a little bit of her hearing. I'm not sure which parts you saw, but I saw the part where they're questioning her about her her objections and dismissal of the CIA claims about sarin gas attack by the Assad government in Syria back in 2013, I believe it was. But she was exactly right, and they were trying to discredit Professor Ted Postel. Well, Ted is professor of MIT, and he's been a consultant on these issues to Department of Defense for decades. A very experienced, qualified guy. And I knew at the time, real world, when I had access to intelligence information, that the claim that the Syrian government had launched a chemical attack on Syrian rebels was a CIA plant. It was an operation. Syrian government didn't do any such thing. It was just entirely staged. So here's Tulsi trying, they're raking her over the coals for, trying to call out the CIA for lying, just like the CIA is lying now about uh, Russian casualties in Ukraine.
Do you think she gets through?
I think so. I think so. Because on the qualification side, um, she's far more qualified than Hegseth. She's actually, she's had more command experience than he has, and more experience as a legislator. But we'll see.
So as we're talking here, I know I'm going backwards here for a second, but a friend just shared, I just heard on Fox the pilot was a female with 500 hours flying time for the crash last night.
Hmm. DEI. Yeah, DEI is very much a possibility.
MVG use at the time of crash possible but not confirmed. Um, that's not a lot of hours. It feels like, Larry.
No, no. 500 hours in a helicopter, and where were those other preceding hours obtained?
So I know I'm getting close to running out of time here with you, but I do want to talk about the Middle East and what happens now with Iran and Syria.
Well, notice how the narrative on Syria has changed. When Assad fell from grace, 2 months ago, it was touted as a major defeat for Russia and Iran. Major defeat. Oh, we're weakened. How's that going now? Um, it didn't weaken Iran, and it certainly didn't weaken Iran's ability to supply Hezbollah, because, in fact, it probably enhanced Iran's ability to supply Hezbollah without being detected by the Israelis. Because previously, Israel was supplying, um, had penetrated Syrian intelligence service and military service. So they knew exactly what the Syrians were doing with Iranians. Knew exactly. Now, not so much. And then um, you've got Turkish insurgent, Turkey struggling to deal with the insurgency. You've got Jelani, who was formerly a terrorist. Once a terrorist, always a terrorist. I apply the same standard to Jelani that I do to Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir. They were both part of terrorist organizations as well in Israel. And then Turkey's trying to figure out whether it wants to go to war with the Syrian Defense Force, the Kurds, who are backed by the United States. So it's stressing them both out, and now Israel's recognizing that that their biggest enemy potentially is Turkey. So, meanwhile, on the Iranian front, Israel keeps wanting to start a war with Iran, but hell, they couldn't even defeat Hamas. I mean, for God's sake, they had 15 months. They had every advantage in the world militarily and the short logistics lines, and they could not defeat Hamas. The Al-Qassam Brigade was out in force when they were releasing hostages over the last 2 weeks. So, Israel, I don't know what they're smoking, but they need to put it down and step away. It is, they keep talking about trying to talk Trump into attacking Iran. My guess, and I may be mistaken, but my guess is that Donald Trump, through Steve Witkoff, is trying to negotiate a Donald Trump deal with Iran. That it won't be known as the JCPOA, it'll be known as the Trump Agreement, the Trump Peace Agreement, where Iran will give up and allow full inspections to ensure it doesn't have nuclear weapons and recognize Israel in exchange for full lifting of sanctions by the United States. I think that I could see that kind of deal getting done.
How would Israel, what would their position be on that?
They'd be pissed, but it's all of a sudden it's going to take away one of the other excuses Israel has for genocide. Israel, right now, if Donald Trump really loves Israel, really loves the Jewish people, and I don't like to equate Judaism with Israel, you try to keep those separate. But Israel's committing suicide. It is destroying its moral authority, and it's destroying actually its military capability. It was not built for prolonged warfare. This has been a war of attrition for them. Now they haven't suffered massive casualties, but let's sort of put it in perspective. They've got their population now is around, with everyone who's left, around 8 million, 7 million. That's about the size of New York City. I think New York City's population is now around 8, 9 million. The Israelis have suffered 700 soldiers killed, which you say from the military side, well, that doesn't sound like a lot. Okay, let me change the phrase. You've had 700 police officers killed this last year. Good God, that's 2 police officers a day getting shot and killed. Do you think would that make news? Bet your ass it would. So that's really, I think, a better way to look at it. And that's not even counting the number wounded, lost legs, lost eyes, traumatic brain injury, etc. So, Israel's, at least its ground force is hurting, and it hasn't achieved its objectives.
I keep coming back to, though, all the donors that contributed to Trump's campaign, and he's got to, right?
Well, let's again come back to the question of assumptions. You're assuming that because Miriam Edelson gave Trump, originally it was supposed to be 100 million, then I heard she only gave him 50 million. Regardless, that you're assuming that she's going to be calling the shots, and that Donald Trump is like an organ grinder's monkey on a string. And she's the organ grinder. She cranks and he dances. Well, it turns out that, let's look at this, what transpired with the ceasefire. Trump forced that ceasefire on Netanyahu. When Witkoff went over and said, "Hey, I need to see Bibi tonight at 4, and it's Friday night, Shabbat, Sabbath." "Oh, sorry, the prime minister doesn't do meetings on the Sabbath. He's an observant Jew." And Witkoff was like, basically, fuck that. Get him in here now. and Bibi had to come, and he agreed to finally accept terms of ceasefire that had been offered 10 months previously. And Witkoff was just, I'm sure Witkoff said some things like, you had to sign up to this, or, that other economic aid you're counting on, it's not going to happen. And we're going to withdraw uh, some of our missile batteries and military personnel, just could have gone down the list. And so he compelled Bibi to do that. Well, that's created internal pressure against Bibi. And there's some reporting by Alistair Crook is that actually Miriam Adelson was one encouraging Trump to get the ceasefire deal. So instead of her being a destructive force and furthering the genocide, it looks like she is a constructive force in getting a ceasefire in place and getting the Palestinians moved back into the northern part of Gaza.
That's going to be my next question of what happens now with Gaza, because you heard that audio of Trump talking about Egypt and Jordan.
Yeah, but you might as well have been talking about Mars and Venus. Palestinians aren't going anywhere. Those countries certainly will not take them. That's been a long mythology in the West. The hell, it goes back to Adolf Hitler wanted to ship the Jews out of Germany to Madagascar, I believe.
What about Turkey? Erdogan. How ambitious is he to, the Ottoman Empire pursue that?
Well, he's ambitious enough that he wants to be the Erdogan Empire, and he's he has been the biggest supporter of Islamic terrorism now in the Middle East, with the United States maybe coming in as a close second, ironically, because of our funding and support for groups like al-Nusra and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. But Erdogan is, he's created a bit of a problem for him. He's not trusted at all by anybody. They recognize his word is no good. So, and he may, I think he's got himself a problem in Syria because it's not one that's easily controlled. And the group that they put in charge of it are not native Syrians. Al-Jilani and his crew are largely, they're foreigners, foreign fighters, mercenaries.
Does he hang on to power? Does people love him, Erdogan?
No. Well, he's not widely beloved at all. I think this is his last term as president. That coupled with his age, he's not in the best of health. I don't know who would replace him, but he's been he talks a good game, but doesn't deliver on a lot of things. Particularly, condemns Israel and then make sure that Israel gets all the oil it needs. He's eager to take over Armenia and work with Azerbaijan because Armenia once was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. So, he's got some expansionist views.
As we've talked here for over an hour, what is your sense of this Trump administration and, how you feel about the United States moving forward, of where we go from here?
Well, I like what Trump has been doing in terms of trying to correct the commitment to woke policies over the last 4 years. This emphasis upon transgenderism and LGBTQ, the alphabet people, as Dave Chappelle calls them. That we get back to a concept of let's worry about competence, not color. Let's stop judging people by their physical appearance and say either you meet the standard or you don't meet the standard. Set the standards clear and enforce them. So, that's good. I think the bombast and bullying that he's engaged in with respect on issues like Panama, Canada, Greenland, have been counterproductive. I think, you've got to figure out what your negotiating situation is. Are you dealing with somebody who's bankrupt and owes you a lot of money? Are you dealing with someone who's bankrupt and owes you very little money? Are you dealing with somebody you actually want to go into business with? Uh, or are you dealing with somebody you want to marry? Each of those scenarios entails a different negotiating posture. There's not a one size fits all. And so far, I'm worried that Trump has decided to just use the one size fits all approach. Yell, bully, threaten. He needs to do a little bit of romancing too.
This term is going to fly by, though, and I wonder where the United States goes from here. I mean, you look at everything in the short term of what will happen tomorrow, but I wonder, both in 26 and 28, where this goes politically.
Well, it depends on what happens in these, next 4 years. If Trump gets us into more wars that he promised not to get us into, then he will have destroyed his base and opened the way for, the United States will then go the way like Europe is right now, completely fragmented with no majority party. Um, if he ends up bringing peace to some of these seemingly intractable issues, then he's laid a foundation for a new generation of leaders, people like J.D. Vance. There Trump's teed up a competition. Let's call it, this would be like a political version of the CBS series Survivors. You have people competing to become president, like Elise Stefanik, the new UN ambassador, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, J.D. Vance. You got Vivek Ramaswamy still out there. So you got a lot of, younger people now who have become political powers, political forces. And Trump's actually instituting a generational change. And you got a sign of that today in his press conference regarding the plane crash. He brought J.D. Vance there. He's making a point early on, get J.D. Vance out front because he recognizes Vance brings a lot to the table for him.
Where can people find you, Larry?
Sonar21.com. Come one, come all.
As always, thank you for doing this, and thank you for everything that you're doing, and I look forward to more conversations ahead.
All right, man. Thank you.
Mic drop.